So hello and welcome everybody. We're delighted to have you join us today for our masterclass, which will focus on how to achieve external success whilst also achieving internal personal fulfillment within your interim executive career. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lisa McAuliffe and I'm a partner in our interim practice in our Sydney office. Today's webinar was actually born out of a conversation that I initially had with Paul Lyons, one of our speakers today. And we were speaking about ways in which we could assist our cohort of interim executives with strategies in regards to managing and recognising their mental health and well-being. So as you know, as interim executives yourself, performance is everything. So you are called upon for your depth of expertise in your chosen field, your ability to fix problems, find solutions, influence stakeholders and board members, all within a finite period of time. Your next role is dependent on your previous and proven success and how you can deploy those transferable skills within the next organisation you join. Yet for you, and for all of us, in fact, it's so important that our success aligns with our own sense of purpose and values. Otherwise, if we continue to work in this fashion, we're in danger of losing ourselves, not only losing ourselves, but potential burnout over time. So the result of that initial conversation has been a collaboration between our two speakers today who can address both sides of the coin and arm us with some strategies to achieve our desired balance of success and fulfillment. So we're delighted today to be joined by Paul Lyons, co-founder and managing partner of Mental Toughness Partners. Paul has extensive background in leadership roles in recruitment and talent in Australia and Asia. He's an advisor, coach, guide to executives, business owners, and boards on their mindset, careers, and leadership opportunities and challenges. And Paul himself has undertaken several interim CEO roles, both here in Australia and overseas, including interim managing partner here at Watermark Search in 2018. Paul's going to be joined today by Pete Clarke, who's founder of 21 Whispers and specializes in virtual facilitation and coaching using mindset and behavioral methodologies to bridge performance gaps. So Pete has worked with C-suite executives and leadership teams for over 20 years, working with individuals and groups, achieving desired results by exposing those potential gaps and providing tools and strategies to close those gaps in order to maximize performance. So Pete will be sharing some of those strategies today with us, but before he does, just a little bit of housekeeping from our side. So we'll run for 45 minutes today, and this session is going to be recorded. Both Paul and Pete will be taking questions at the end. So please jump on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. There will be prizes for the best two questions. So if you need an incentive, there it is. There are two prizes on offer, and they are an MTQ, a mental toughness questionnaire, which is a psychometric measure which tests your mental toughness. Paul and Pete will both debrief one for each of those winners. So very generous prize. Thank you both for that. Ali will send through a follow-up email over the next few days to all our attendees with the recording of this session and also contact details for our speakers. We'll also include a link to our interim survey, which I would encourage you all to complete if you can. This is a really important piece of research which we have been compiling now for 11 years. This is the 11th year for us, and it has been instrumental in educating the market. The data we collect with this survey is a snapshot of the whole of the interim executive market. So it's not just people that have been placed by Watermark, but it's interim executives who have secured their work through other brokers or maybe through your own networks. So what it enables us to do is actually share that information, those trends, with organizations and key decision makers across all industries, and it increases awareness by creating opportunities for everybody. So if, like us, you're interested in growing the interim market, I would absolutely encourage you to jump on and complete that survey. It will take a couple of days for that email to go out, but I will be posting a reminder on LinkedIn after this webinar. So do connect, jump on and connect with me if you can, and you can follow that link through LinkedIn as well. So thank you in advance for that. And thank you to all those people that have completed it already. And without further ado, I shall hand you over to Pete initially to start today's session. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. I'm Pete Clarke, founder of 21 Whispers, which I'll explain a little bit later. So as Paul and I were discussing what we thought would be important for you as interim execs who go into potentially an unknown situation, having to manage complex stakeholder needs and wants whilst trying to drive a particular result. We thought visually, it's a bit like this infinity loop, where you have this outer expectation from the client to drive achievement and results, whatever that might be, whilst if that's all we focus on, we lose this inner fulfillment from ourselves of what that success means. And so today is really about helping you navigate some of those potentially competing priorities. I'm going to speak a little bit about the external achievement aspect with a few strategies to help you. And Paul, who's going to go first, will speak about the internal fulfillment aspect with a few strategies to help you. And at the end, we'll leave you with a couple of takeaways that you can sign up for that might give you some extra depth to your thinking. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Pete. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. So for me, internal fulfillment is critical for your long-term success in your career and life. So let's just look at what it is. And I think it provides the meaning in living your life, and it enables you to find joy and satisfaction from the process as well as the outcome. It's also important because it embraces the essence of you, and that's a really essential framework for your mental strength. So that's your resilience, your agility, your confidence, and you're going to need that to be a consistently successful leader, be it on a permanent or an interim basis. But the really interesting thing is that internal fulfillment can be fleeting. So what happens for many people during their lifetime is that they temporarily lose this internal fulfillment. And that may have happened to you on the call. And the reason for that is that it's really easy to sacrifice yourself and focus on achieving the best outcomes for your family, for your career. And then over the years, you just start to become defined by what you do rather than who you are. And then, and I remember this when it happened to me, is what happens is you wake up one morning feeling really empty and confused and conflicted as to why you're doing what you're doing, and not being able to make sense of your life. And this loss of internal fulfillment then invariably leads to a loss of your motivation, your energy, your momentum, your mental strength. And it's something that I often see in interim executives and business founders that I coach. So this internal fulfillment is really critical for, I think, for your ongoing well-being, which Lisa mentioned, and your ongoing success. So how do you ensure you become and stay personally fulfilled? I think there are 3 strategies to focus on, and I'm going to go through them. Clarity, control, and confidence. So let's start with clarity. I think it's the most important of the 3, but they're all important. And I'll start with a quote, a really good quote, I think, by Marty Rubin. And he talks about, when the meaning is unclear, there is no meaning. So when the meaning is unclear, there is no meaning. And I think that's important because clarity enables you to get a really clear vision on your self-identity, and that drives your internal fulfillment. And without this clarity, you experience dissonance, confusion, a lack of momentum. So clarity is really important. And I think there are 3 main questions that you've got to ask and answer yourself to achieve this clarity. And that involves often some time, some soul searching. So the first one, first question is who are you and what do you stand for? And this sense of self is vital, kind of knowing who you are and how you perform under pressure, you know, where do you shine, where do you struggle, knowing what you stand for, so your values and how they perhaps work in practice. Which hill do you choose to die on? It's very important to understand your values. And what are your boundaries related to those values? So what behavior is non-negotiable and what do you tolerate? And having clarity on these things starts to build your sense of security, your psychological armor. So that's your mental strength, which you're going to need in your interim assignment and your interim career. And I think this clarity is also really important for your proposition in marketing yourself to future employers. So you need to be very clear, very concise about who you are and what problems you can solve for them if you're actually going to win the gig in the first place. So that's really important. So who are you? The second one, just as important to answer, is what's your purpose? So why do you do what you do? You know, what gives you meaning? And this to me is the essence of your internal fulfillment. I mean, it generally creates your intrinsic motivation, which is your desire to get up in the morning and keep on going and not give up. And without it, your drive and your energy fades pretty quickly because you've got no meaning. So understanding your purpose is pretty critical in answering that question. And the third one is, what's your plan? So where are you going and how are you going to get there? And your plan also needs to be pretty clear and simple to help you find your direction and your destination and be able to generate the momentum to get you there. So I've just touched the surface, obviously, but clarity, really, really important in terms of internal fulfillment, being crystal clear and certain on who you are, what you stand for, knowing your strengths, your kryptonite, where you stress, where you don't, and your purpose and your plan. It's also pretty essential because it strengthens your control and confidence, which are also important components, and I'll come on to those now. So, control. I like quotes, and this one's a goodie as well. So, Dr. Wayne Dyer, his quote is, you can't always control what goes on outside, but you can always control what goes on inside. And having this sense of control enables you to be in charge of your own destiny, your own future, and that provides you with internal fulfillment. Without this control, you can easily become confused and frustrated because your future destiny becomes somewhat elusive and out of reach. So 3 aspects of control that are important for your internal fulfillment. They're from the mindset aspect. The first of all is control your mind, or your mind controls you. So you need to be really conscious and present every waking moment and take control and ownership of your mind. Think of it as being in the driving seat, not the passenger seat of your mind. Because if your mind's in control and not you, your mind's going to go anywhere. It'll take you anywhere, and usually places that you don't want to go. So you need to own your mind and what goes on in your mind until such point you're happy to freewheel. So really important that you take control. There's a fine book by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, who are Navy SEALs that fought in the Gulf Wars, called Extreme Ownership. And they argue that the best leaders take full responsibility for their actions and decisions, the teams and failures, but they talk a lot about control of your mindset. So that's a book that's worth reading. Second thing, something we all know, but we don't all practice, is control only what you can control and influence. So there's so much happening in your day-to-day world and on your interim assignment that it's often easy to feel overwhelmed. But much of what's going on is just beyond your control and influence. So important to develop a mindset that focuses for the most part only on what you can control and influence and kind of ignores everything else. what you can't influence, what you can't control. And that reduces the emotional energy and the anguish and stress invested in thoughts and feelings that just don't bring any positive return. Thirdly, Lisa talked about personal health and well-being, and I think it's important to have control over the good habits and routines that help you make good decisions. And I'm sure there'll be many, many of you will have a morning routine, an evening routine, you'll have an operating cadence, but let's focus on 3 really important habits, good habits, around what we call the Holy Trinity of personal health. So ensure you've got good habits around sleep, diet, exercise. If nothing else, just make sure you've got those things right, and you're going to have a clear mindset that you're in control. So those are 3 mindset strategies around control that can benefit your internal fulfillment. Control your mind, control only what you can control, and control the habits and routines that ensure you make good decisions. Moving on to the final one, which the third one in my section around internal fulfillment, is confidence. Now, experience tells you what to do. Confidence allows you to do it. I think confidence is just a magic ingredient. It enables you to make multiple good decisions and generate momentum that helps create satisfaction and fulfillment. And if you don't have that confidence or self-belief, then by default, you limit your ability to make good decisions with successful outcomes. So here are 3 suggestions around confidence. The first one is around your inner voice. So one of the inhibitors to situations where you need confidence, or often need courage as well, to make something happen, is the negativity of your inner voice. And we've all felt that thing behind us talking negatively to us. And that's generated by our brain. Our brain has got an inbuilt negativity bias. So we have about 50,000 thoughts and feelings every day. And 70% of them are programmed to be negative if they're left unchecked. So it's really important that you actively and consciously counter and override this negative chatter with an internal running commentary that's objective and realistically positive, and with language that reaffirms your ability. So counter your negative inner voice. Secondly is all around portraying your confidence through your body language. So body language, positive body language, is essential for a leader. It's essential that you ensure that you walk and talk and listen with confidence, and that you ensure there's congruence between what you're thinking, what you're saying, or how you're behaving, and your presence. Because most people can read your body language, especially your facial expressions, and are looking for that congruence of confidence. So body language, I think that's really important. And then thirdly, you really need to develop the mindset and the confidence to quickly build relationships and trust, because you're thrust into a situation and you need to gain trust and confidence from the people around you. And that usually comes from good communication. So listening, directing, leading, asking questions that lead to solutions. Often it's around clarity. So I've whistled through this, but really what I want to get across is that for an internal fulfillment, you want to have 3 mindset strategies. One is focus on clarity. So that's all around your internal fulfillment and your sense of identity, what your purpose is. Then you control, which is mindset, being in control. And then strategies around confidence, which are managing your inner voice, ensuring you've got strong body language, and developing relationship and trust pretty quickly. If you do have any questions, as we said before, as Lisa said, Pete and I will welcome questions on what each of us is talking about. So I'll leave it for there, and then I'll introduce Pete. And Pete, you mentioned in the beginning this infinity loop, this relationship between internal fulfillment and external achievement. So I'm really interested to understand more about external achievement. So over to you.
Thanks, Paul. And hopefully it goes without saying, the stuff that Paul was talking about, this internal fulfillment, that can be a lifetime journey for people.
Sure.
And we're really giving headlines here to prompt some additional or broader or provocative thinking. And so I'm going to start with an experiment. I'm guessing that over your careers, maybe even for the interim appointment, that you've probably gone through some psychometric testing. You've probably had interviews, you've probably had all your MBTIs or your LSIs, you've probably done all that. And that's popped out a result. And you've probably done things like colors, and that might or may not have informed whether you've gotten the role or whether you're going to be successful in that role. I'm going to, kind of without your permission, because you can't really interact other than the Q&A, is try a little experiment, because you may not have done the one with regard to shapes. Now, this is I'm going to show you some shapes in a second, and you're going to have to follow along a little bit, because normally if we're doing this face-to-face, I could interact. I'm going to have to presume certain things. So you may have noticed the picture over my left shoulder. It's some shapes. Now, the obvious shape is the arrow. Now, to the right of the arrow, work with me on this, you've got the shape of an elephant or a dog, maybe even a rabbit, because actually the elephant's on the other side of the arrow. Next to the elephant, you have the crab. And next to the crab, you have a very flat and straight snake. Now, the question I have for you, can anyone see any other animals? And if you can see any other animals, just pop them in the chat box. Now, obviously, a cat. Yeah, the cat's on the left too. Now, obviously, there's quite a lot of people on the call, and I don't know what you're really thinking. But what's interesting is almost straight away, someone's come up with fly. Yeah, there's a fly. Now, if you can't see the fly, you're thinking, what is he talking about? Where's the fly? I can only see shapes. There's no fly there. Now, obviously, we're looking for the word fly. Now, I'll make it easy for you. Here's one I prepared earlier. And here's the shapes. So the experiment is this, that when you go into an organization, you may or may not have clarity about what's required. Part of the challenge, I think, for us interim executives is helping people see what we can already see. It seems obvious to us. It's right in front of us. It says fly. Can't you see that? And the temptation is to get frustrated and overwhelmed and annoyed because people can't see what you can see. So I'm going to talk about three things with regard to the external achievement part. The first of which is clarity. And the first tip is to spend as much time as required helping people see what you can potentially see. We all know the maxim that sometimes it takes 7 times to see it or hear it for the first time. And that's possibly what's required, because it might be really clear to you, but maybe not others. And I'm going to guess, because this is always what happens, because you can still see the picture over my left shoulder, there's still 1 or 2 of you looking at that going, I can't see it. I still can't see it. I still can't see it. And yet for others, it's like, it's obvious. It's right in front of you. And that's possibly some of the complexity that you have to lean into as you go into an organization. Yeah, of course. No, it's all you see. That's correct. The second tip on clarity I would give you is often pretty much all of the organizations that we've all worked with probably should, if not do, customer segmentation. They segment their customers or clients according to the products and services that best serve that need. And a lot of work is gone into doing that. Well, you're going into a very complex stakeholder situation. And I wonder if you do enough stakeholder segmentation. Do you really consider who's got legitimacy, who's got urgency, and who's got the power? And do you treat those stakeholders, nuanced, of course, a little bit differently? Because as we know, all stakeholders are important, but some stakeholders are a little bit more important than others. So as part of the follow-up for this, we've put together a very simple template, a very simple canvas that you can sign up for, and it will give you some questions to consider when you're thinking about the stakeholders that you have to engage and influence in your interim role. Because your job's not for life, it's just for Christmas in some way. So how do you do a good, quick, effective job with your stakeholders that probably will have a big influence over the success of your role? And then the third thing under clarity from an external perspective is most organizations will have some sort of purpose. If not, they should. They'll have some sort of mission. If not, they should. And they may have a refresh on values. Whatever language, and we know there's different words used to describe those same things. The tip, and what I've observed is wherever there's currency already in the organization, whether it's purpose, whether it's mission, whether it's values, that's what I'd lean into. So if already you sense in the organization there's currency around our values, or there's currency around our new refreshed purpose, or there's currency about what we're trying to achieve commercially, that's what gets people going. I'd be paying attention to the currency and lean into that and try to maximize and optimize the currency that already sits there, which seems such an obvious thing to say, but as you go in with fresh eyes, you might see things that others can't see. So in the clarity space, helping others see what you can see, stakeholder segmentation, and focusing on the currency of wherever that is in terms of purpose, mission, and values. The second thing I would share with you is connection. If last year taught us anything, it's that we have a primal need to connect as humans, family, friends, community, colleagues, etc., etc. And what's interesting, some research out of Harvard suggests that when we interact, and not just face-to-face, but almost any situation, there's really two lenses we have over that as the recipient of that interaction. One is warmth, and the other is competence. And what we know is that warmth trumps competence every time. Now, a little aside, my eldest daughter is just finished her psych degree, and she did a thesis on the facial expressions that are demonstrating how we interact and whether it dilutes or builds trust. Now, she was given a challenge to make it a creative title. And I don't know why, but she got marked down for this, which I think is stupid, because I thought this was very creative. Our title was The Curse of Resting Bitch Face. In that, within 7 seconds, we are deciding, based on psychological threat, whether that person is going to harm us or not. And then that influences our view of whether they're competent or not. So it's not saying you can't be incompetent. You've got to have the competence. But if you then start with and you connect first via warmth, it dilutes the threat response. So warmth trumps competence almost every time. And you've got to have both. That would be the first sub-bullet point under connection. The second aspect of connection, I'd say, is the coherence between head, heart, and gut. Often in our head is where we think our thoughts happen, and we assume that's who we are. Well, we're more than that. You are more than your thoughts. The team surrounding you are more than their thoughts. It's just that gray bit between our ears that we think the thoughts come from. We know that there's neurologically immense power in our heart. There is a whole institute, the HeartMath Institute, which has looked at the neurobiology of the power that the heart has over connection. And we know anecdotally, people say, how do you get the head and the heart? I'd also add in the triple threat of the gut. We know our gut has neurological connections all the way up through our head and our heart. And so if you can get coherence and you can have people thinking this feels right, this sense is right, and that I think this is the right thing to do, then that coherence is incredibly powerful. They'll almost run through brick walls if there's a connection there. And what we know is If there's an incongruence, if there's a split between what I'm thinking versus what my heart's telling me, whereas what my gut's telling me, then the optimization of performance and excellence and productivity is lessened because of that. So that's the second aspect of connection. Can you help them connect and get coherence around head, heart, and gut? Third aspect of connection is belonging. Again, there's research to suggest that if you were to survey one's sense of belonging in the organization, they are 6 times more likely to be engaged than someone who has no sense of belonging. So certainly what I'm finding, and I don't do this, but I work with people that do, that engagement surveys give us a little bit of information, but belonging surveys give us more. That if we have a sense of belonging to something bigger than ourselves, we will actually do the discretionary effort pours out of us. And we've forgotten a little bit the power of community, the power of belonging, the power of team, the power of us all in this together, and we'll work it out on the way. So the second aspect I'm going to share with you is connection. 3 things. Warmth trumps competence every time. Connect, head, heart, and gut. And finally, focus on belonging. Have them belong to something that's bigger than themselves. The final aspect I'm going to share with you is being accountable. Now, so often I hear organizations use the word accountable. And the reason I've tweaked it is because I feel that accountable is fear and punishment driven. We can definitely get people to do stuff by holding them to account, but it's a fear driven perspective. Whereas I'm leaning on the work that Google did years ago called Project Aristotle, when they looked at teams and what makes them perform. The second most important factor was dependability. The sort of people that when asked, are you up for this? They go, yep, count me in. Count me in. So that's what I mean by countable. Can you present an environment where people are willing to put their hand physically or metaphorically up and go, yep, I'm in. Count me in. So that's what countable means, as opposed to the opposite, which can work, of accountability. That would be my first suggestion around countable. The second thing around countable is it's the most important thing is that the most important thing is the most important thing. That's the most important thing. And it's usually 1 or 2 things. If you were to ask some of your new colleagues, what's the most important thing going on in your life right now? It might not be the task or the email they have to answer. It might be, but it might be something else. And so if you can find out what that is, not only do they feel heard, and that might be all they need, but you help focus their time, effort, and attention on the most important thing for them and the organization, that releases just so much energy, creativity, innovation, collaboration. It's really quite extra. It's a little bit magical in some ways. There's a mystery to it, which leads me to my final point around countable, is that I have a strong belief. And every time I've worked with a client, when I've asked the question, I would say 95% of people give the same answer. Do you believe that 1 + 1 can equal more than 2? And the answer is usually, yes, I do. Now, it's a little bit of a mystery sometimes. I don't know what that looks like. And, sometimes in our organization, 1 + 1 doesn't even equal 2 at the moment because we're a little bit dysfunctional. The best we can get is 1 + 1 = 2. But there's something about the magic and the wisdom of people working together, collaborating, wrestling with things, building upon things, that 1 + 1 can very much more equal than 2. So that's something that isn't necessarily a structure or a process. You've kind of almost got to lean into that and take a step at a time. I've found that it's a bit like a motion sensor light. When you've got one of those in your garden and you're still in the dark, it's like, well, where do we go? You've got to take a step. Oh, then the light comes on. Ah, right, now I can see the way. And then you pause again. Oh, the light's gone off. Where do we go? Take another step. Take another step, then the light comes on. So that's a little bit how you manifest the wisdom of teams. And the third point, I'd summarize it as, none of us is better than all of us. And to spend time, effort, and attention tapping into that is a really powerful thing. So let me summarize. I've spoken about clarity, about connection, and about being countable. And whilst our work as interim executives is never done, it really is never complete, that doesn't excuse us from it. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Pete. That was marvellous. I always enjoy listening to your presentations. And what struck me there with your focus on external achievement was how interlinked they are with internal fulfillment. So there were quite a few things that we both talked about from different angles that were similar or the same. And one of the graphics that you produced that you're going to send people afterwards is this infinity loop, which connects internal fulfillment with external achievement.
Yeah, and Paul, can I maybe just offer a tip there then? So when people are thinking about what you've said and what I've said, there are probably a lot of people going, yeah, that makes sense. The tip is to notice the early warning signals when we over-index on one of them. As opposed to waiting till it's, oh, I'm ill. What are the early warning signals that tell you you're not getting enough sleep, exercise, and mental health stuff? What are the early warning signals mean that you're not focusing enough on the external achievement part? So we can pull ourselves back a little bit, hence the infinity loop visual. That means we're always navigating potentially two competing priorities.
Because it's a balance between the two, isn't it? I think you're right. And presumably that changes over time or within an assignment. You're going to focus on one or the other more. But as you say, you've just got to recognise which is which and how much you need at the time. Yeah, so that's good. Okay, look, I think I'm looking at the clock and we're moving on to a few more. We've only a few minutes to go before we close. So Lisa, can I hand back to you and
yes,
you manage the questions?
Thank you both. Honestly, that's been wonderful, and the engagement has been really good in regards to the chat box and the question box. So we will get back to all of the questions that we can't answer now. But love the visual, Pete. Thank you. I think somebody saw a saber-toothed tiger in there somewhere. I didn't quite see that.
Okay, that's a first. Maybe that's in some of the pictures behind me.
A question from Martin. So he's asking, what are some good strategies to counter your inner negative voice?
Well, I think one strategy is to name your inner voice. So I've got some clients who will, it's negative Nigel or negative Nancy. So what you're trying to do is to stay objective, factual, by naming and shaming. That's the first step. The second step is to try and have a conversation with your inner voice where you're adopting the factual, objective part, because your inner voice often is swirling around. It's a subjective voice. Oh, come on, Paul, you can't climb those stairs, take the escalator. And I've got to counter that by going, yes, I can climb stairs. I did last week. I've had a doctor's medical, and I just try and keep it objective. So that's probably two quick ones, is name and shame. So negative Nigel, I have a conversation with Nigel all the time, and I'm just shaming him because he's trying to talk me out of something. And then just stay objective, have an objective conversation.
Can I add something? It comes up all the time, this inner voice question. And it does, for me, it makes me curious about, well, if we've got this inner voice, who are they talking to? Or is it me talking to me, or is it another me talking to a different me? So it's like, is it separate from me? Maybe we don't have enough time to explore that. But in my more bullish moments, whether I name it, I would often say to my inner voice, shut that up. Because what our inner voice is doing, it's actually doing its job. And its job is to protect us. That's its job. So it's doing a great job at protecting us from risk and fear and hurt and blame and judgment. So if we kind of acknowledge and go, yeah, okay, I get it, all right, I get it, but just not right now. You can sit in the passenger seat, all right? It's me in the driver's seat on this particular thing. And so accepting that it's doing its job and, dance with it, have a relationship with it, it means that the strength it has over us tends to subside. It's still there because we kind of want it there. We do need protection sometimes, but not all the time. So our ability to welcome it in and accept it and have a little dance can often be helpful.
Fantastic. Okay, a question from Belinda. Is there a oops, I've just lost that question now. Is there a twilight zone between the inner and outer, the navigation lane between the two, and tips to guide the navigation?
So, not trying to be trite about it, but the tips are basically what Paul and I have suggested, of which you'll get more detail when you sign up later. What I would perhaps suggest is, just do this quickly. If these are the two boundaries, the inner boundary and the outer boundary, and we're starting here at A, and we want to end up somewhere over there, I guess the twilight zone or the sweet spot is navigating our way between those boundaries. Hence the question about, can you notice the early warning signals? You know, if you're going to try and find yourself and you've got, you know, candles and sandals and you meditate on the beach all day, I'm pretty sure you won't get a role. But if all you're focused on is just the results and you don't look after yourself well enough, then you're going to get burnt out. And by definition, you'll be less likely to produce the results. So it's this navigation, this infinity loop between those two boundaries that is the sweet spot. I don't think we ever necessarily hit the sweet spot all the time. Some would call that flow. But the irony about flow is when you know you're in flow, you come out.
Yeah.
And so it's navigating the early warning signal so you don't bump up against hard. You can, just brush against it and you're back into the other aspect. And life will throw things at us that will test it big time.
Yeah. There's been fascinating feedback here, and we'll share it with you both. So, but I think what you're saying is really resonating with people, and you are going to be sending on some further information which you're including in our email, aren't you? Some really useful links, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Have we got time for one more question? Just one more, if I can squeeze one in from Alice. Alice is asking, how do we manage our mental well-being when there is increasing demand at work due to workforce reduction?
If I could very quickly go first, I think there's a couple of things involved there. One is you're trying to ensure you get some you time every day. So get an hour, half an hour, however long you can, but every day, so it's consistent. And then do what brings you joy, what brings you relief mentally. So exercise for sure, eating the right things, sleep. But there may be other things that you do that bring you relief from the unrelenting stress. But exercise, I have to say, is a really good one. Just walking 20 minutes, half an hour a day on the beach, in a park, but just being out and about with fresh air. That's very quickly.
Yeah, the exercise, sleep, and diet, as you were saying, Paul, earlier. Well, look, I think we're coming to the end now, so we're going to have to close off. But so many tips to take away there. I know for me, it's just controlling what you control and being present in the moment and watching my resting bitch face. I think I will be concentrating on. But thank you so much, and thank you to everybody who's given your feedback and asked your questions today. We will get back to you and answer all of those questions and share that information. But it's there's been an overwhelming response and an incredible turnout today, so it's certainly struck a chord with everybody. We really appreciate your attendance here.
Thanks for the opportunity, Lisa. It was a pleasure.
Thank you both, and goodbye to everybody, and we will see you again at the next webinar. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.